Hello, and welcome to my podcast about canine cognition. This is the third podcast that I'm recording, and it's also going to be the most specific, because this time we're taking a look at Johnson and Wynne, or Wine, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's W-Y-N-N-E, their study about how shock collars may be very useful in training dogs. And the reason that I want to talk about this is because I think it's a bad idea. And I mean, I'll try to hold back a lot of the personal or moral complaints, at least for the beginning, and mostly talk about the ways in which I think that the study is probably not the best. So basically what they did is they wanted to stop dogs from chasing things, because a lot of times that can be very dangerous for dogs. If they're aggressive dogs, then they might bite someone, and that could cause some really extremely problematic things. If a dog really hurts someone, there are circumstances in which dogs are put down because of that. Also, if they chase a squirrel or out of control, it can really make people uncomfortable. And it could even lead to them running out into the street to chase after a car or something and end up getting themselves killed. So because of this, they're suggesting that using a shock collar is basically, because if it's more effective, then it's worth using for these dogs who may have more aggressive or problematic tendencies. So they have three conditions. One of them is using shock collars. One of them is using food incentives. And the third one is also using food incentives, but the lure is slightly different. And basically they show this fluffy squirrel-ish. It's not actually looking like a squirrel, but it's like a fluffy thing, and it's a lure, and it zips around really fast in this big grassy area. And they try to get the dog to not chase this lure by saying the word banana. They choose the word banana because they don't want the dog to already know the word, right? So they want to see if they can truly learn this new association, and using the word stop might cause some difficulties if a dog already knows the word stop. It might not let us see how effective the training actually is. It might just be does the dog already know stop? So they use the word banana, and I think that's silly, but banana is an awesome word to choose. So basically, in the first condition, the shock collar condition, they say banana and then shock the dog, and they will continue to do so until the dog stops chasing the lure. In the second and third conditions, they will say banana and drop one pellet of food into a metal bowl, and they will continue to do this until the dog stops chasing the lure. So, comparing these two things, they found that the shock collar stopped dogs from chasing the thing a lot quicker. And eventually just saying banana would stop the dog from chasing the lure. This did not happen with the food conditions. So they extrapolate from that, then shock collars must be way more effective than other modes of training, right? And I think that is maybe a little bit silly, because the difference in a shock and one little pellet of food is huge in terms of scale, not just valence. So you can say that the shock is negative and the food is positive, so negative did better than positive, but the negative is an amount of pain every time they do something, and the positive is one pellet of food, and those just aren't equivalent. When you're positively training a dog, you reinforce them for having good behavior. You don't say okay, here's this one piece of food, here's one kibble, come get this one kibble, and then you can have it if you stop chasing. And one kibble just isn't, that reward isn't probably as large as even the reward that a dog would receive just of being happy from chasing the thing. So I just think that maybe the design that they used is a little bit flawed. I think that there are other better ways to train your dog not to chase things that aren't just dropping one piece of kibble into a metal bowl every time that they chase something. And because of that, I think that their understanding of what their results show is maybe a little bit off. I don't think I agree with what they have suggested. So, one confusing thing is that they have 3 conditions, right, and not 4, because they have shock or food, and then they have 2 versions of food, one where the lure is fast and one where it slowly gets faster from starting from a slow speed. But I don't understand why they did that if they weren't going to have that same condition in the shock condition. And it just kind of makes it feel like maybe they did have that condition and something went weird with it, so they threw it out. Again, this is speculation, but it's just really strange to have that condition in with no real justification. Also, another thing about why the food isn't going to work is that it's like obviously not as time sensitive. When you get shocked if you're running at something, you're like, ouch, immediately. But when food is placed into a bowl, that's not something that's immediate. You're like, oh, now there's food in there. And they did take it away at the end if the dog did not come and get the food. So failing to stop chasing did mean that they got no food. But like at the same time, it's just not as time sensitive, and as such is definitely not going to be as effective. Also, they measured stress levels and said that the shock collar dogs were not any more stressed than were the dogs in the other conditions. And they did this from measuring cortisol levels. Now, cortisol levels are definitely not good enough to measure what stress is as a whole. It's just one chemical in the dog's body and can't really tell us the whole story. But even if we imagine that it is, the way that they measured these samples and the way that they compared their numbers is just a little bit strange. They took opportunistic fecal samples, is what they said. So whenever a dog went to go use the potty, they would pick it up and then they would measure the cortisol levels within that. The problem with this is different stress levels are probably going to cause different behaviors, right? They might not go potty as much, or they might go potty more, depending on what kind of situation they're in. And furthermore, they're basing this off of 2 dogs in condition A, 1 dog in condition B, and 4 dogs in condition C. That means that it's 2 from the shock, 1 from the food, and then 4 from the food where the lure moved slower. And the 2 dogs in the shock condition had consistently high levels of cortisol, according to their graph. And the 1B dog had 1 measurement where their cortisol reached a higher level than that of the shock collar dogs. So that feels to me like one outlier measurement that is being used to infer that there was no stress at all. It doesn't feel legitimate to me, because if you look at the graph, the shock collar dogs have consistently higher levels, except for this one instance from 1 dog. And just because of that, I don't think it's fair to say that they don't have increased levels of fear or stress. And that's even without considering the whole argument of cortisol not being enough. Furthermore, just small sample size shows that a lot of these results could be just from chance. Specific dogs will act in specific ways, and if you don't have enough dogs, then you're not going to find a consistent average for how all dogs will act. There was also a very short amount of time to condition the food with the reward. It's a lot faster when you get shocked, but again, if there's just food being placed while someone says banana and you run at something, then what are you supposed to understand banana to mean? Is it to mean that you're running at something? Is it to mean stop? Is it to mean there's some food for you now? It's just not as obvious. And also, they didn't test if any of these dogs were food motivated. It could be that some of these dogs just didn't really care about the food. Also, there weren't really that many tests about the long-term impacts. The only one they did was one final test trial at the end where they would take the dogs to a new circumstance and see if they would chase a lure in a completely different situation. And all of the dogs did, basically. There was no real difference between the shock and the food conditions when it was a new setting, which suggests that maybe using this shock collar training did not help improve dogs' performance in not chasing stuff, right? you could argue that it helps for one specific kind of problem. And sure, it may help, but also this study simply doesn't look effectively at other ways that you could train a dog not to chase a lure, or to chase a squirrel, or to chase a person. It just doesn't get at how you could help train a dog in a way that doesn't hurt them or make them feel fear. So, that's the analytical side. Now I want to talk about some things that I think are more interesting to talk about, which is how some of the parts of this written at ASU, the Harvard of the West, come across as if they are written by a supervillain. So very early on in the paper, the sentence is written, aside from presumably pain-induced yelps in the dogs with e-collars when they received shocks, none of the dogs in any group showed any signs of stress or distress. What are you talking about? Aside from screaming in pain, there was no distress? That's crazy. And one of the early justifications was a sentence saying, since the 1930s, handlers have been using since the 1930s, handlers have been using electricity to punish dogs. What? Can you think of a different time when we used to punish people with electricity that we don't do anymore when we did it in the 1930s? I can. Maybe that's not a great justification. Why is this written like someone evil is writing it? There's definitely merit to what they're talking about, right? If you're so frightened that your dog is going to get into immense trouble if they do one specific thing and you have to stop that thing, maybe a shock collar is reasonable. Like, it's an ethics decision that you'll have to make. Is it worth making your dog have a fear association with something in order to stop them from potentially dying, right? But saying things like we used to shock dogs in the 30s as justification, or like they weren't afraid except for when they screamed in pain, that's just crazy. Like, you don't have to include that. There's a good argument to make. They just aren't making it. It's also, I don't understand. They explain the beginning, or they explain a worse study earlier where this was truly an evil thing to do to dogs, where they would shock the floor and dogs had to jump away from the floor. And it was called traumatic avoidance learning, where they would have to avoid this one area because of their trauma. This is basically the same thing, just less traumatic. And I don't understand how they feel differently, to be honest. If you're shocking your dog and giving them real physical pain, and then they're learning because they're afraid of that pain, that just seems like maybe it's not something that we should do right away. Maybe that's just not something that we should do to dogs. And, you know, you could argue that this pain and fear isn't so bad when dogs could be given up to shelters, shot, euthanized, or hit by cars and killed. But they don't provide any data about any of these things. They just keep like straw-manning this argument that your dog could be in danger, but there's no evidence about any of it. And sure, I understand that this is kind of like trying to accrue some basic knowledge and understand if shock collars are something that we can really use at all to train dogs, but just at least provide some more justification about why we should do it and not why it's not evil. It just doesn't quite sit right with me, the way that the paper is structured, and that's not even to mention all the methodological problems with it. I found myself very frustrated reading this paper. I hope that if you read the paper, you will feel similarly frustrated. And I hope that you don't buy a shock collar for your dog, because they don't deserve that.